This episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. Speaking Podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREWtally and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show. What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is the returning Joe Cotella of Dead. They have a new single out called Kill Beautiful Things. If you remember the last time Joe came on, they were pushing two singles for an as yet unnamed, unreleased album. So we didn't really focus on that. Actually, we talked a lot about, at the time, I had just come back from seeing Kanye West at the Donda event in Chicago, so that was really fresh in my mind as far as what I saw, a lot of the camaraderie of going to a bigger show, having just seen Knocked Loose literally, I think, the day before. But it was one of those things to have gone 2 years without seeing any live music, to then having gone to the Upheaval Festival here in Michigan, in Grand Rapids specifically, where you're basically at a festival full on, to then going to the Kanye West Donda event where you're in a fucking football stadium, to then going to a 400 cap, Knocked Loose sold out show, a hardcore show. I've kind of been trying to process getting back into going to shows. Literally, as I'm recording this right now, Every Time I Die has announced a tour with 68 where they are playing the same room that I saw Knocked Loose in that sold out. Tomorrow I go see Code Orange, play the same room. So it's one of those where it's just been kind of interesting getting back into the swing of things, back into going to shows of varying levels and so forth. But really the biggest thing, and I know I've not really talked about it with the Kanye West event, is just kind of the bigger picture of what I think the Kanye West event, or events really, all three of them, what they really could usher in as far as the live music, the live performance art experience, and how it can possibly cultivate something bigger in that space, especially when it comes to releasing new music. So the funny thing is, like I've said plenty of times with these chats that I do, I don't have anything pre-planned. I'm not writing out questions. I'm just talking to someone. So Joe literally came in while I was watching a Knocked Loose video of their live stream event. Still the Donda event fresh on my mind. And it was just kind of, it's been interesting to talk to some of these artists and just kind of throw ideas out that I have been thinking about based on shows that I've gone to, experiences that I've been seeing coming back to shows, and just kind of getting their perspective on things. I really love this conversation Joe and I had, and he's somebody actually that I feel like I would love to have on more frequently. But Joe is a really well-spoken person. the few times I've had him on at this point. He's not afraid to answer any question. He answers it with sincerity and honesty, and I fucking love that with the guests that I have. This is just a fun chat. It's really loose, and you'll hear me bring up a conversation I was supposed to have right after him with John 5. So far, that did not happen. John ran into some scheduling issues, and that got pushed back. So, unfortunately, you are not prepping to potentially hear a John 5 interview currently. I was still working on getting that going. Something I'm currently working on, though, is actually a Jack and Coke. My wife made me one of my favorite drinks. Jack and Coke is just a standard, trusty. Chances are, if you see me at a bar and you want to buy me a drink, Jack and Coke is the one. It is one of the first drinks that I grew into wanting to have, as you heard me on the Vox and Hops episode with Matt from Cryptopsy. I think I had said that Bud Light was like my first beer that I had, but one of my first drinks was Jack Daniels. It is still one of my favorite drinks. It is still my go-to. I will drink just about anything in the whiskey family, from Carstairs, if you know your well whiskeys at bars, to just about anything. Honestly, I will drink and try anything at least once. But this is a well poured drink by my wife. She knows how I like them, and was one of those that when she suggested it, when I said I wanted to have one more drink tonight, she was like, "I poured you a Jack and Coke." So there you go. If my wife knows that preemptively before I record a podcast to make me a Jack and Coke, then if you ever see me out in the wild, you will know that I will probably definitely enjoy a Jack and Coke. All of that said, this was a really fun chat with Joe. Kind of covers a lot of different stuff. Let's get into it, and I will talk to you all on the other side of it. The other night.
Oh wow, is that
That's not what that was. That was actually their live stream that's on YouTube now. But that was the first small show I've gotten to go to because I've been to 3 shows since stuff's kind of been coming back to normal, quote unquote. So it was All People Festival here in Grand Rapids, which had Korn, Rob Zombie, a few others like that, and then. Probably 2 weeks ago at this point now, or 3. I went to that Kanye West thing in Chicago.
Oh, shit.
And then the first real experience of something smaller was the sold-out Knock Loose show last week. So,
killer, man. Wow, you're getting back into it. I watched one of those Kanye things. It seemed pretty kind of strange to me, but was he doing the same thing at all of them? No. So, it's weird because it's there's a friend of mine that works that lives here in town, but he works for Holix, which does all the music hosting for when your records have a media link. I get it from Holix, so he works for that company, and him and I have been going back and forth for the last almost 2 months since the first listening event, talking about what we heard, some of the music you got to hear, because that was the only way to hear quote unquote the record. And then you're trying to take in the visuals of what everything meant. And then it was oh, the record didn't come out. Then Here comes the second one, 2 weeks later. And then we're kind of talking about okay, this verse is gone, but now this one's here. And what does this visual represent? And then I went to the third one in Chicago. And that was just on a whole nother level. So then it's a matter of all right, now being in the environment, it's there were 2 people next to my wife and I that came all the way from Philly, last minute. They're fuck it, we came and hopped on a flight. Our flight leaves at 5 a.m. tomorrow. But we wanted to come out and see this. The people behind me lived in Chicago and didn't know it was Manson on stage. And I was leaned over my wife, yo, fuck, that's Manson. And then they're is that who that white dude is? Oh, we couldn't figure that out. But then we're trying to figure out is that the baby up there? We're all collectively trying to be yo, this is a different verse. Oh, hey, that's so and so up on stage, and then we're all just kind of collectively nerding out kind of over this shared experience. But it was just really weird because it's the thing I've been trying to kind of wrap my head around is whether you like Kanye or not, it's irrelevant, but what will this listening event where you're basically getting to hear a record before it's still being worked on, like some of the songs as you were hearing them were not mixed entirely the same, and you're selling out stadiums, and it's like, will this now be open up new avenues potentially for other musicians where you can kind of do an album cycle or a listening party in a completely different way and marry performance art to a live event? And what does that now start doing and looking like? It's just kind of interesting to start talking about the bigger implications of what the Kanye West thing could do to music moving forward.
Wow. That was a lot about that. And not in a whatever. I didn't think that, I didn't think about it all that way, but you're right. I mean, it's a really interesting thing, and I watched, like I said, the first one or whatever it was on iTunes. I think it was LA or something, and I didn't really know what was supposed to be happening. I didn't know if I was like, he's not performing necessarily. He's not playing this. He's just kind of playing the songs and doing performance art to it. It was interesting, and I didn't know that he was changing. It wasn't mixed yet. He was changing songs, and they had been different and whatnot. So really interesting. I think it's a cool thing. I mean, there's no particular way that you should share music, right? Like, I mean, and just because we've come to know, like you record it, you put it out, blah blah blah. Like that doesn't need to be the thing, especially now, like you're saying, with technology and things. And Kanye is one of those guys that pushes the envelope, of course. So I don't know. That could be an interesting thing if that ends up being something that becomes popular, I guess, to an extent, where everybody starts doing it or not, crazy. Yeah, crazy.
Well, I mean, I think like the more interesting thing that like my buddy and I have been talking about is just beyond just even that of the fact that it's love him, hate him, however you feel about Donda as an album, whatever, all of that aside, to literally have people be so invested in an album, a full album,
right,
for a month, and breaking down every little bit you're giving them and talking about music in this culture that we live in now where everyone's so quick to be like, heard the single, heard the record, done. Like, and you're just moving on. Like, the fact that he was able to sustain attention for a record that long and it wasn't done technically, it's like, that's just so interesting. And it like I said, you can't help but really just kind of think about it, because it's the last, and we were talking about this, it's like I feel like the last record really that captured the fucking world like that was like Chinese Democracy when it finally came out, because everyone's like, oh, that record that's been long rumored to be coming out, okay, like let's see what this is about. Okay.
Oh man, that's interesting. Yeah, no, it is cool. It's cool that to give more attention to an album, and if there's new ways to do it, if this is one of those ways to get people to actually indulge in a full album and actually, like you said, spend a month, like maybe like you would, I guess I'd call it back in the day, like you would get an album, you'd purchase it, it would spend like a month or whatever in your CD player in your car or wherever it was, and you really would indulge in the whole thing a lot more than people do now, oftentimes. And it's cool to highlight a whole album and to get into it. And usually that commentary maybe comes afterward on Spotify or something. They'll do like, or you'll release, demo versions of it. And I think there's something good to that too, because you want people to hear the final version. But it is also interesting to hear, I guess you get to hear it through the artist's ears and eyes, to see something come into fruition a little bit more. Like, like you're saying, the mixes are changing, the verses are changing, you're still updating things. It's kind of an interesting new perspective for people to have, because they usually just get that final perfect version of it. And to hear it not fully mixed, to hear certain changes, that's an interesting concept. And I don't know, I have mixed feelings, I would say, about it. I'm sure that would be cool in certain scenarios, and other ones not so much. I'm sure it could hinder certain things, but also be very cool in other ways with other things. So I guess at least it's pushing the envelope, and that's cool because music needs that, right?
Well, I guess it's interesting, and I'll kind of explain how I came to this idea, like realizing it, and then I'll pose the question to you and see if you've ever kind of done something similar. So going back actually to Kanye, on the Life of Pablo tour, when I went and saw that, and it's just literally him on that floating stage, and it's pretty much just him in the shadows. When that record came out, I was like, this song sucks. Not really a fan of this song. I don't really know what this is. Then I went and saw it live, and I was like, oh, that was never meant to be like an album cut. That was probably always meant to be, when you're in a room with all these people, this is what the vibe is going to do and what the reaction is going to be. Has there been a song maybe that you've been demoing, you play it out, and then you're like, it didn't quite hit the way we thought it did, but this part like really hit, let's keep that, work on this part again, and then you end up with what the final version of a song is.
Right. Well, that's an interesting thing, because I know comedians do that, where they go out and, they test out jokes and things like that. I saw one time we saw Louis C.K. In Manhattan. He was just in a little club. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's the one that's downstairs or whatever, the popular one there. And he just had jokes on his phone, and he was just like reading them off his phone and dropping them, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. I know people don't like him or whatever, but he's great still. And he was dropping jokes on his phone, and it was just this cool, like you're saying, like a real kind of very organic, very stripped down version, and trying it out. And they're like, cool. And they do that, right? You'll see different specials from different people, and they'll do a joke, and then you'll see them revise it. I actually just watched that with Bill Burr. You see them revise it to a new joke at one point, and it's cool like that. So I think, I don't know if we've ever done that exactly like that, but I mean, I do know, it is cool to try things out live, and if something really goes off, you're like, oh, okay, we got to do something with that for sure. Or you just know a song's going to be good in that way, because there's no better way than to just play it in front of a room of people and see how the energy is affected by it. You know what I mean? So that's really interesting. Yeah, it's cool that maybe musicians can do that, and I'm sure they've done it to some extent. Maybe more jam bandy things, or more kind of loose, playing bands can do that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? When a lot of times when we're playing shows, we have a lot of electronics and programming and shit in there, so it's kind of a little more locked in. But that's something we've talked about, was trying to get a little bit looser and try to open things up and not be stuck in that world, in that box. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Yeah, it's a cool thing, and it's cool because I've really only thought about comedians doing it, but it's great for musicians to do it, of course.
Well, I think it's funny because as I've been trying, so in the last I'll say 7 months or so, I've kind of because you were on the podcast a while ago, and I kind of would come up with a couple of questions, and I might be like, that's a really good centerpiece. That's the good we'll probably be about 15-20 minutes in. I'll probably have you pretty loose and kind of get a feel for me and you, and then I can ask this really good question. But then I'm going to start piecing together everything around it. So I've created a whole conversation, and I'm sprinkling things in. So I'm like, okay, if that all works, this leads into this, whatever. And then I realized it's it creates a good interview and people like listening to it. But then I was like, but I'm not leaving any room for real moments to happen, or I'm trying to force something to get back to where I wanted to go. Right. And that's not how a conversation works. That's not really what a podcast is supposed to be. A podcast is supposed to be two people talking, and then people just get to listen to it after the fact. And so with this, I was like, I have nothing planned. I even told the publicist when he was like, hey, we'd love to have Joe come back. And I was like, cool, I'm pretty much probably not going to talk about the single, because last time he came on, we talked about those two singles. Couldn't talk about a record because no record was in sight. Then the pandemic basically happened, and now here we are with one extra song since then, and that was about a year and a half ago. So I was like, I'm just going to have a conversation with him and see where the fuck it goes. And he was like, yep, that's fine. So it's funny because as you were kind of talking about kind of being locked in a little bit more due to kind of probably your click tracks, your programs and all that kind of stuff, and having a set that's pretty much dialed in from the jump and will be the same all the time.
Yep.
I know one of our mutual big fandoms is of Every Time I Die.
Yeah.
And I love how that band will read a room and then be like, I mean, they'll have a set list, and there are times where it'll be like half of the set list doesn't necessarily get played, or at least not in that order, because they're like, yo, the room's really fucking going. Cool, let's pick it up. Let's play, Floater right now instead of, 7 songs later or whatever. Like, I love that that band just takes so many risks and is really about creating a unique environment for that specific show and being totally in the moment. And, knowing that is a band that you love, A, what do you think of the new song that came out a little bit ago? And then B, you just kind of did hit on it by saying that, you're going to try to get a little bit more away from being so regimented, I guess is a good word for it. But in a perfect world, would you like to just kind of go strip away a lot of that stuff and just be a lean, mean, like just straight ahead, like we're not using the samples or anything like that. We're just giving you the best of these songs as best as the 4 or 5 of us can play.
Right. Well, I think that there's a give and take with that. I've been, because I've been playing music for a long time, and I've been in bands with nothing like that. You know what I mean? And there is a chaoticness to it, which is great, and there's a liberation to it, which is great. But I also think it lends to certain styles of bands and certain styles of music, because I also think that having like some of the electronics and beats and stuff, I guess the only way we could get around that would be to add in an actual, person to be playing things, which is something we've discussed actually. To keep it where everybody could it's more of a jam. It's more of like there's no metronome with there's a beat that's going to drop in and that kind of thing. Although it just sounds really good. I remember just seeing Static X one time. And I wasn't even, like you were talking about, I wasn't even a big fan, actually. I didn't like them that much. They were opening for Mudvayne, and I think Bury Your Dead played that, whatever tour that was. And I remember just being like, this sounds incredible. Like, they just blew me away, and I became a Static X fan from watching them play a show. And I hadn't been at all. And I just, I loved the incorporation of their electronics and all that kind of stuff happening with them. But then, like you're talking about, Every Time I Die, one of my favorite bands for sure. The insanity at their shows, the chaos and everything, and there's something that you don't know what you're going to get a lot of times, and it's really great, And speaking of them, I think that the last 4 songs they put out, I guess, AWOL. Oh man, I'm trying to think of all the names right now. Desperate Times, whatever, and then the newest one as well. I think it's the best stuff they've put out. I think it's up there with my favorite stuff that they've ever put out. I think it's incredible. I think it sounds ferocious, and it sounds like early Every Time I Die, but it sounds newer. And I think they did it with Will Putney. Mm-hmm. And I'm just such a fan of his recordings. The End albums he did, I just think sound incredible. The Body Count album he did sounds incredible, and there's other ones as well. But I'm a big fan of his stuff, and I think that he killed it for Every Time I Die. It's a great marriage of making music together. I'm so ecstatic to hear the rest of their album. I'm so excited about it. I love it.
Yeah, it's crazy that you get to a level with that band where you're just like, well, they're not topping that. And then it's like, the Big Dirty comes out and you're like, hey, you're not topping that. New Junk Aesthetic comes out, you're like, you're not topping that. And then it's like, Low Teens, you're like, there's no fucking way you're topping Low Teens.
Right.
And then you're 4 songs in, you're like, yeah, all right. Yup.
Yeah. I agree. And I have, their tattoo on my body and everything like that. I mean, I love them, and I've seen them probably maybe almost more than I've seen any other band, either them or Alkaline Trio. It's between the two. I'm not sure who I've seen more. And Glassjaw I saw a lot too. But I fell off of Every Time I Die for a little while, during certain albums. Obviously Hot Damn, Gutter Phenomenon, Big Dirty, and X Lives, and then I fell off a little bit through the middle there. And then this new one really, honestly, like I didn't dislike them. I still loved them. I enjoyed tracks and everything. But for whatever reason, maybe it was what I was listening to or whatever it was, but this new one really pulled me back in a huge way, like to where I feel like I love them as much as when I first found them, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
No, it totally does. And it's funny because so I started I've had this weird thing like where I don't feel like I love music as much as I used to in a weird way, and I think a lot of it is because of doing this show.
Really?
You kind of have to, the way I was doing it, where it's like, okay, like I'm getting a record, I'm looking for something interesting to talk about, like, oh, here's a cool, like, this wasn't necessarily a great example, but it kind of showcases how in depth I'm listening to everything. So Finch's "Say Hello to Sunshine," it's like one of my favorite records of theirs.
That's funny.
And
that the other day. That's great.
So there's a song, I'm blanking on the song title, but there's a song, and the tail riff on that song, or I'm sorry, it's actually the bridge. The bridge part of that song uses the main riff for Ink. Like, but they bring it back.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I remember a long time ago talking to Nate from Finch, and I was like, hey, so was that intentional? Or, and he goes, I don't think I've ever noticed that. So, like, because I listen to music listening for, oh, there is something that you clearly were, like, putting little breadcrumbs, like, here's a little Easter egg for you or whatever, that I feel like because I was listening to so much music to talk to people like you and try to come up with something else that's different and off the beaten path from what you're going to do on a press junket day to make it more interesting for you, that I was just burning myself out. And then it's like, I don't want to listen to music. I don't want it, because all I feel like I have to do now is listen to it to find something like that in it. So then I just was like resorting back to podcasts and really like silence, I guess, technically. But it's been in doing like curating a weekly playlist where I'm like, I still listen to music, but a lot of times it's older stuff, or it's more, hip hop or R&B or whatever. And so I've been doing playlists where I'm like, here's a cool song. Like, I threw on a Janet Jackson song, and I was like, I've always loved Janet Jackson. Here's a cool thing about this. Terry Jam and, Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam, like, did this, and they did all this stuff. And if you listen to this inspired these things, or, whatever. And it's been doing, and then for a Patreon thing where I'll do a video explaining why I picked the songs I did and what I like about them or whatever, where it's made me kind of fall in love with just listening to music and being like, oh, this takes me back to this, or this reminds me of this, or hey, if you really pay close attention, here's why I sequenced these 3 songs together. There actually is a weird little theme I threw together. And it's in doing that has kind of made me fall in love with listening to records again. And then even being at the Donda thing where it's like, I'm talking to people about our love of this one artist, or what we've noticed over the other 2 listening events, and what we're seeing, and what does it all mean. And it's one of those that it's like, when you are a part of something like that, a collection or a musical family, I guess, for lack of a better term, and you can see how it's making everyone react. It's like, you like that Donda event, like looking at a whole fucking stadium around me and just people, it's like, people don't know this fucking music, but they're having a good time and they're just getting lost in the moment. And it's like, this is what it's all about. And then going to that Knock Loose show, because all I'd been to really was festivals and big things where I can't be interactive really with other people. And being at that Knock Loose show, I was like, man, I'm about to be 37 here in a couple of weeks, and I'm old, and like I don't get down like I used to. And then they cut into counting worms and shit like that, and I'm like, nope, here, wife, here, hold my glasses, here's all my shit. And I went in the pit, crowd surfed and all that kind of stuff, and staged over. And I was like, yeah. The next day I was like, God, fuck, my body can't do this that much anymore because I don't do that. But it reminded me of why I love hardcore music and why I love aggressive music. And in a matter of a week between going to a big, large-scale hip-hop show, whatever you want to call it, to being in a small, sweaty club, it's those things in a year and a half removed from all of it that just is like, yeah, no, I do love music. I do really love going to shows, and I love the experience and what it makes me do and how it makes me feel. I mean, I don't know. Like, I can't imagine being in your position where the only thing, in theory, you could do is just keep creating music.
Right.
to get that feeling again, to get that, like, just sense of love of whatever. Because I could almost, and I guess that's the question for you, was there a moment during this pandemic where maybe you were fatigued in just creating because you were like, what's the fucking point?
Yeah, there was a lot of ups and downs. There always is as an artist, I think. And I don't know if you create music as well or not, or create other art as well. But I mean, I'm talking to a lot of friends about it. There's always that like kind of doubt in you, where you're like, shit, this or that. There's a lot of highs and a lot of lows, and you just got to try to stay balanced in the middle, honestly, because you can get real down on yourself. writer's block or whatever, which oftentimes you're writing, good stuff, but you just feel like everything is shit. And you just hate everything you're doing. And then especially in the pandemic time, I started creating even like some weird kind of like dark wave, like Depeche Mode, 9 Inch Nails, industrial type stuff. And I have that. I sent it to some friends. It's just even fun to just send music to like, your 10, 12 closest friends and get their thoughts on some stuff too. It's even as exciting as, whatever, and especially to be creating something that other people aren't used to hearing, and maybe they'll never hear any of that stuff. I don't know, so there's still even I send stuff to my parents even, and they don't get half of it, of course, but like, oh, hey, I like that, or whatever. Just making something and sharing it. That's what art is, really. It's just something meant to be shared. That's its purpose, is to make it. And as far as I'm concerned, you make it, you give it to somebody, and then they give it to somebody, and its purpose is to be shared, just like our purpose is to live an experience. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what art does, what songs do. The whole pandemic had, our album that we were sitting on. We recorded our music video during the pandemic. There's always phone calls about how we're going to come back, the tour and everything like that. So there was a bit of like a light at the end of the tunnel for some certain points, especially when the vaccine started happening and everything started opening back up a little bit. But it was dark, and it was like you were talking about. I think you mentioned the word nostalgic, and I really went into a nostalgic type of thing. And I actually went even further than that, and I can't think of the word right now, but there's a word for feeling nostalgia for a time period that you didn't actually live through. And I can't think of what that word is, but if you Google that kind of phrase, that definition, you can find it. And it was just really interesting, like listening to stuff from the 60s and 50s and 70s and, just times I wasn't alive. And you listen to it and you can almost feel like you almost match it up with visuals in your mind of maybe seeing the old Woodstock movie, and like you could almost feel like you were there to listen to Bob Dylan, or you were almost there to listen to CCR or Tom Petty or something like that, you know what I mean, during that time, during their prime, and I also did that with a lot of 90s stuff. I got way into like early 90s, like the Lemonheads and Talking Heads and REM and Primus, just kind of like that kind of weird, amazing, just amazing music that didn't fit a mold as far as I'm concerned, and it really brought me back to a time that I was really too young to be a part of that scene. I remember hearing it, throughout my life, but I really dove into those catalogs, and I hadn't really done that, and I really enjoyed diving into bands. I did that with the Simple Minds the other night. They have this song from the Breakfast Club, and I was like, I've only heard that one single. Why is that? I love that song. I should listen to the rest of the album, and I did, and they had a lot of great stuff. I did that with Tears for Fears recently too. So it's just interesting. I mean, there is so much out there to indulge in and to find, and it doesn't have to be new. It doesn't have to be old, new, whatever it is. You know what I mean? I found a lot of great new music too. So I mean, I don't know. There's just so much out there to indulge in and to find. Because like I was saying, with Every Time I Die, even you go through phases. You know what I mean? And I even did that with Marilyn Manson a long time ago. I stopped listening to him for whatever reason, and I know he's did some terrible stuff, but I'm just talking about listening to his music. I missed like 4 albums from him at one point because I wasn't into whatever he was doing. I was just into hardcore or whatever I was into at that time, and I didn't identify with anything else. And I went back and listened to all these great Manson songs. Again, this was some years ago, and I'm not really, I'm kind of weird about listening to his music at this point right now because some of the stuff he did, but I feel that way with Michael Jackson too. So I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. But so I don't know. It's interesting. There's just so much to dive into, and maybe you weren't at a place where you were ready to hear that. And it happens with a movie too. Maybe you watched a movie and you weren't ready to watch that movie at that time, but then you see it another time and it really resonates with you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. A couple of points that are pretty interesting, actually, that you touched on there. So I had someone, and that's kind of what also started me doing the playlist thing, but someone had reached out to me on Twitter, and they're like, oh, it seems like based on the people you have, some of the conversations you have with the guests you have on, and I was doing a friend of mine's podcast called Discography Discussion, where we literally just listen to a band's discography, go in chronological order, and you talk about it. And I'd make a lot of comments because a lot of the stuff I was having to listen to is death metal shit, and it was just like, that's not really my scene, but like I'm not going to shit on it because that's way too easy to be like, it sucks. Try to find the good things that I can notice in it or whatever. Yeah. But it was, them saying like, what are you listening to that's new? And I tend to find that I go backwards. So, I grew up with my parents listening to like, their music, like Rod Stewart, The Faces, Zeppelin, Great White, all the stuff from the 80s and so forth. And before that, yeah. But like, it's funny, you kind of mentioned going and taking a deep dive on people. So, with my love of hip hop, and living in Michigan, Jay Dilla has been someone that everyone, between the Roots, Common, so many people in that R&B, hip hop, Kanye even, that I was like, I should do my due diligence and go back and listen to Dilla and see what the big fucking deal was. And I spent there's a mixtape on YouTube that's like, I think it's a 5-hour mix, and it's almost like a stream of conscious, him just looping beats. Like, here's a beat, and then it's whatever, and then here comes the next one, here comes the next one. And I would listen to that thing for I think I listened to it for 4 or 5 months almost every day at work. That was just the only thing I listened to. So really get an idea of him, what he does, how his transitions and all that kind of stuff. And then I started listening to his actual albums, so Donuts and all this other stuff. And then after I felt like I really had a good understanding of who he was, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start listening to the offshoot stuff, the people he used to work with. So Common, that first Common record, listening to Slum Village and stuff like that. And then it's you start hearing oh, this is the influence. So then even going to Slum Village where Dilla left after the first record, then they got somebody else. And then on the third record, they ended up they were working with John Legend quite a bit. And then Kanye started producing. And then you start going, oh, now that I listen to a lot of Kanye, I start hearing, since he lived in Chicago and Dilla's from Detroit, I hear a lot of the early Kanye being influenced by Dilla. That's where your, college dropout, late registration sounds come from. So then where you're okay, so Kanye is carrying the torch from what Dilla did, which Dilla was kind of taking that lo-fi sample heavy stuff from the late 80s, early 90s of rap. And then it's now you have such a broader spectrum of where hip hop and R&B, how they meld together, going all the way back to Motown and stuff like that. And so you just start getting a bigger understanding of just music. And then when you start listening to other stuff, maybe there might be a song you have, and I'm like, yo, that's totally that's totally a RZA kind of style, whatever. Because he does stuff with Shavo from System, and they did these things and da 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 da. And I might be able to pick out a weird influence that I noticed from you because, oh yeah, that's weird. I was listening to a lot of Wu-Tang and a lot of RZA stuff, Liquid Swords and da 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 da. And then you just go down these rabbit holes. So it's funny because I've been going backwards to see what it informs moving forward. And I don't think a lot of people do that. And I don't know if it's because we're in a culture where people just don't care or don't want to care.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's maybe a certain type of person, maybe like yourself and myself, where you have such a thirst to know. You want knowledge about things, and I'm the same way because I wonder that too, and I've expressed that at times. That I think it's important, of course, to listen to modern music. I think it's just as important on the flip for people that only listen to their old stuff. Well, this is what I liked when I was 18 through 22, and that's all that I'm going to listen to now. That's no good either because there's great music coming out. You know what I mean? People saying music's not good anymore is bullshit. And saying, people old stuff from back in the day is terrible. It's bullshit. It's all relevant, and it was all, it all had its time, and some of it is still just as good now as it ever was, and so it is really interesting to go back. I know I do the same thing, and you have to do a little bit of research, but it's almost like reading those liner notes in a CD book where you see, oh shit, I didn't know fucking Sting sang on that Dire Straits song, the I want my, I didn't know that my life, and I found that, actually it just happened the other day where Dan Aykroyd was singing on some song randomly, and I was like, what? But he was in the Blues Brothers too, so I didn't think about that. But it's really interesting when you see that, and it's such a fun thing to come across. And I think, there's a reason that we learn history, and there's a reason that we learn, a lot of things where things came from, because it's interesting. It helps you better understand where they are now. And you talk about Kanye and you talk about all that, I mean, he's worked with so many different people, and he's been so influential over the times. And I really did appreciate his earlier stuff a lot more personally than his newer stuff. like you said, college dropout, graduation, that kind of era. But it's really cool. It's really interesting to see. I dove back in to De La Soul a lot over the Stakes is High album in particular was very big. I mean, I dove into the Judgment Night soundtrack as well, which I don't know if you jam that much, but so many cool collaborations at that time with, like, mainly it seemed like East Coast hardcore. Slayer was in there too, and it was just a mix of of hip hop alternative and just the underground put together into one thing. And I think it really is like, it's really amazing. There's so many different styles of music, and there's so many different, versions of scenes and things like that where people can come from, and we're all influenced. And nowadays there's so much that's influencing us. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but it's just it is interesting. It really is so cool. And there's so much to look back on, and there's so much to find, the origin of sounds.
Well, I think that's kind of been one of the things initially when you came onto my radar, because like we have a mutual friend in common, like actual friend in Emily, that I know, like her and her friend Tiffany, I know would go tour with you, like literally rent an RV and go on tour with you guys for a little bit on their own, following you guys around. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you guys have been on my radar for a while, and the thing that was always interesting about you guys for me was, and I think I'm a little bit older than Emily by like a couple of years, but it's like it reminded me of stuff I was listening to in like high school, like, and that's been even the thing, like you talking about East Coast hardcore. It's like, I've been saying for a while, Biohazard is low key a nu metal band. Like they have those kind of like bouncy nu metal riffs, but they're a hardcore band, an East Coast hardcore band. So it was one of those where when listening to, your first album, I was like, it reminds me of bands like Korn, the nu metal sound, but it has a little bit more of what has now, I guess, sort of become gent, where like gent is just another word for heavier nu metal, really. And it's one of those where I look at a band right now, like Knocked Loose is a great example, but I was going to say a band like Turnstile, who are incorporating so much and are just a breath of fresh air. Doc Coyle, I think, put it best, where he was like, this EP, and now that they have the full record out, Glow, he's like, I feel like Turnstile right now is as important as what Refuse were doing on Shape of Punk to Come. That we're going to look back, 10, 20 years from now and be like, this was the band that really took some chances, and the rest of the scene either changed or started taking different things from that and adding to it what they will, and then now we have these new bands that are being influenced and bringing in so many different things. I mean, you look at someone like Hyro the Hero even doing that too, where it's like he's kind of political. It's kind of Rage Against the Machine meets straight up hip hop, or like Ice-T Body Count stuff, where it's talking about socially conscious lyrics and things, but he's doing it differently, where it almost feels like Let Live, or like what The Fever are doing, which is also sort of an offshoot of like Bad Brains and stuff like that. So it's like you're getting all of these bands right now who are doing really interesting things, but they're not any one thing. They're like 17 different things put together, and they're finding their own way. And I mean, even on your new single, Kill Beautiful Things, it's kind of funny because it's as I was listening to it, I was like, this doesn't necessarily sound like anything else, the other two singles really, but there is this kind of underlying thing I'm noticing lyrically, it seems like, where it's like that is the connection between everything. It may not be a sonic thing that you're picking up on, where you're like, yes, here is the dead sound. It's like, no, the dead sound so far from what I've gathered is more the lyrics and the themes being presented. That's what's bringing everything together, and that's what's tying it all together. But you're getting to experiment a little bit more sonically to grow who you are as musicians and as artists, and personally, anyway.
Right. Well, thank you. That's great. To touch on a couple things, the Turnstile album is incredible. I was having a conversation with my drummer Matt, and he I've been listening to Turnstile for a bit now, and he said, dude, I just finally listened. I've been telling him to listen forever. He finally listened to it. He's like, dude, I feel like it's the first time I'm hearing Every Time I Die. I feel like it's the first time I'm hearing Glassjaw. Like important bands like Refuse as well. I think those four bands, to me personally in my life, were bands like that, where I think they influenced artists almost more than other people, in a lot of ways. And I think that they were just so special. And I think that Turnstile is so special, and that new album is incredible. And so just to leave it at that, I mean, I think it's probably, it really is special. And I think it is going to influence a lot of people. And I think it makes, definitely other musicians are going to go, dude, you know, I don't know, that's whatever. It makes, the Horizon does that too. It makes you want to liberate yourself and your sounds and things like that, and get a little crazier. You know, I think they do that really, really well as well.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, and then I was going to say, to touch on what you were talking about with Dead, definitely, you know, the new metal sound that we have, you know, that happens in there. I definitely think, you know, it's still there on the new album. It was there on the first album, and I always loved the new metal. But like we talked about, I loved everything. You know, like all the time I listen to punk rock has been like what I started with. You know, like Nirvana was the reason I got a guitar, and I know that they're grunge, but they're way more to me punk rock than grunge. And so I come from that place of conscious lyrics, of punk rock and of hip hop, like in the early 90s, mid 90s, you know, where it was conscious lyrics. I always loved the new metal stuff, and it was great, but there was always a little bit of a disconnect with the lyrics in new metal, where it was a little, you know, some of it. Obviously, the great stuff is great. You know, you can't hate on the great new metal lyrically, but some of it, you know, was just not good. And so I always tried to always have a bit of a consciousness with my lyrics. It's always been important to me to try to make people think about their thought process and who they are and what they support and just whatever it is, you know, and take a look at yourself and that kind of thing. So I think that's maybe what you're talking about, is the themes behind it. There's a cognitive kind of thought process behind it, and that's just the way that I am. I'm always analyzing myself, analyzing human beings, analyzing the way we live life, and all those things like that. So I definitely think it's, you know, a lot of it is a little bit deeper in the lyrics than a lot of the you know, whatever you'd call new metal. But I've always loved the sounds of new metal, and you know, there's obviously bands, like I said, that have fantastic lyrics. You can't generalize on any genre. There's great music in all genres, you know. So anyway, that's what I would say about those statements.
Yeah, it's funny because as I get older now, I feel like even the quote unquote worst shit I listen to, where I'm like, yeah, this is garbage, like it's throwaway pop, whatever. But then I've always been one that's like, I don't care, like, if you like what I like, you know, the other day, someone randomly at the bar, because I work at the bar a couple of nights a week, someone randomly threw on it's track 2 off of Coldplay's Parachutes record, and I started singing it, and then it's one that's got the really cool melody, the guitar melody, like it's kind of like really like upbeat and quick, and then it just kind of slows out for the verse.
Sing it loud and clear.
Yeah, I think that, yeah.
Fantastic album, yeah.
So I was kind of singing along to my wife's like, is this fucking Coldplay? And I was like, yeah, this album is so fucking good. And she goes, ugh. And I was like, what do you mean, ugh? Like, this album is so fucking good. I was like, The Scientist or Rush of Blood to the Head, like, okay. And then after that, they kind of started losing me. But I was like, this one record is just, it's so fucking good. And then she's like, sometimes you shock me with some of the shit you like and are into. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I love it. It's a great sounding record. And for it to be like of the quote unquote band's first record, it was just so unassuming, because it's like everyone knows Yellow, and yeah, that's an alright song, but it's like, you know, songs like Sparks or Shimmer and stuff like that, or even Trouble, like, man, just like showcases like the range and dynamics of that band, like on that record. It's just so good.
I mean, that's a very special album for sure for me as well. I absolutely love it front to back. It's one of those put on headphones in a dark room, you know, kind of albums, and it was it's still great to this day. And I've honestly loved at least a few songs from every album they've ever put out. I just think, you know, and Chris Martin just seems like such a bright light as a human being, and I appreciate that existing in the world too. So I do love that album in particular. And you know, and you might think that, but you know, you might think, wow, I can't believe you like this or you like that, but you know, there really is no thing that we need to live inside of. You know, I'm a huge you know what I mean? I don't know if people would think that or not, you know. He's one of the, you know, he's written some of the most potent lyrics for my life, you know. You know, so, or I really even enjoy some Justin Bieber stuff, you know, but not on the same, you know, not on a certain level. I enjoy it in a different level. It only gets to a certain point in my soul, and then it doesn't quite get as deep as other things. But you know, I still enjoy, you know, other things like that. You know what I mean? So it's, I don't know. You can't just say I don't like this band of what I know of them and their identity, and say that I don't identify with that, so I don't want to listen to it. You know, because you never know. You'd be surprised. It's just like saying that about a type of person. Be like, oh, I don't really identify with that type of person. We have nothing to talk about. No, you probably do, and you probably have a lot more in common than you think you do. You know, and that kind of goes the same with music, I think, as well.
Well, it's just kind of. It's kind of the funny thing because, like, you know, growing up, like, I was so segregated, for lack of a better term, because it's like, I love sports. Still do. And that always surprises people because they look at me and they're like, you know, like I said, I work at a bar. So the other day I was wearing, I've been buying old basketball jerseys, like, from when I was growing up. So it's like, I was like, I want a Washington Bullets jersey. But then I was like, okay, like, what's someone kind of cool that, like, people probably forgot about was on that team or whatever. So I was like, I got a Jerry Stackhouse Bullets jersey. Okay. So I got that, wore it to the bar the other day, and people were like, whoa, like a Bullets jersey? Stackhouse? Oh, man, what do you know about any of that? And then I'm like, oh, I mean, I've been watching basketball since, like, 95. So, like, what do you want me to tell you about? And then they're just like, you know, or like when I wore, like, this was really interesting. So I went to Atlanta, like during the NBA playoffs. So I went with a friend to go do something else, and then we went to the first round playoff game against the Knicks, and I bought a jersey while I was there, the MLK jerseys, their city jerseys. And my buddy was like, we have to take you to a Waffle House since you've never been to one. So I go, but we get to one in Kentucky, and there's me looking like I am wearing this MLK basketball jersey. And then there's my friend who's Hispanic, and he's also covered in tattoos, and he's wearing his band's like Miami Heat looking like jersey with his band name on it. And then I'm like, yeah, we stick out. And it was funny though, because like as we were talking, I go, it's weird because in that situation where I just bought the jersey, I was getting what felt like a lot of condescending negative looks for being like, why are you dressed this way? None of it, like, it does not compute. But then ever since I've been wearing that jersey, like when I wear it out, like a lot of, like, again, working at the bar, you know, watching the games, I would wear the jerseys during the games when they'd have them on the TV. I remember like a lot of the African American people that come into our bar, and they're like, man, respect for wearing that jersey. And I'm like, sure. Like, to me, it was just a cool jersey. It looked cool. And like, it's a team I'm kind of rooting for right now. So whatever, didn't think much of it. But I realized as people, they were saying like, it means a lot that, you know, you as a non-person of color are wearing a Martin Luther King Jr. jersey, you know, celebrating his life, his legacy and all that kind of stuff. And then it dawned on me, I go, well, that's probably part of the weird stigma that I was getting in Kentucky, where people were like, what the fuck? Like, what weird statement are you making with this? And then it was just kind of weird that it's like, even in that, like sports, it's like, okay, just my love of sports and collecting stuff. And then it's all of a sudden, it's like, now I guess I'm low key making a political statement, even though I'm not. But it's weird how some of these things tie in, but it's all based on a perception of who someone thinks you are based on zero interactions with you initially.
Sure. Yeah. That's.
By the way, Waffle House is pretty cool. I liked it.
You what?
I enjoyed it. I mean, it's a greasy diner, but it was pretty solid.
Oh yeah, Waffle House, man. Yeah, dude, we hit that on the road a bunch, man. We do breakfast there oftentimes, man. We love it. Matt loves his biscuits and gravy there, I believe is what he gets all the time, man. Anyway. Yeah, it's, you know, it's an interesting thing. You know, it just goes back, you know, just like the don't judge a book by its cover thing that goes for everybody, you know, all the time. You know, it's I don't know what to say about it. You know, it is. It's just like, I just like good, you know, good vibes, man. And I think, you know, I've met people of every type of thing, and it's just so funny how you like learn separation and things, you know. But I remember, you know, growing up and having no idea about separation of anything. Like, I just thought, I just was just like, I love everything. Everything's cool. Everything's exciting. And then the world kind of teaches you otherwise for some reason. And it was always so disheartening for me. And I still don't get it, you know. And I know you're not necessarily talking about that, but I'm just saying I just don't get it. It's such a simple thing, because we all really are the same thing. And I don't know, it's beautiful. But I'm a fan of, like, what you're saying is the mixing the different vibes together, the tattoos with sports stuff, with whatever. But I know so many people that from different, you know, I guess subcultures, I guess you'd call it, you know, if you're into sports or hip hop or rock or you're into fucking books, you know, and you're a hipster, I don't know, whatever, like, you know, like there's great people from all subgenres, and I think that there's greatness in all of it, and to combine it all together is awesome, you know. And I think maybe you and I are the type of people that combine a lot of things together, you know, because I think it's cool to love a lot of different things. I think it's cool to support all different types of cultures and music and thoughts and everything like that, you know. As long as they're cool, then I think it's great, you know what I mean? So you know, as long as you're just being yourself and you're being cool, man, then I think that's all that life's about anyway, man. Just be cool, you know?
So kind of
a little hippie at my heart, you know, for sure.
Must be all that 60s and 70s music you've been listening to. Kind of to wrap it up, because I literally have John 5 in like the next like 9 minutes, so I could keep talking to you for a while, but we had to reschedule, and that was the only time I had to get back with him. But it's funny, kind of wrapping up a quick little side story. So I found out, like, I got hit up on Facebook a while back. This person's like, "Hey, are you so-and-so's kid?" And I was like, "Yeah, those are my aunt, like, that's my aunt and uncle." I go, "My dad is so-and-so." And they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, my mom is, like, on your grandfather's side of these people, so we're indirectly related." And what was interesting is, like, I was like, oh, like, kind of thought it was weird, but then found out, like, he's in the industry. Like, he does a lot of, like, lighting design stuff like that for touring bands, like went out with Tesla and stuff like that. He's actually going to be on your guys' tour when you guys are getting ready to hit the road. So potentially, like, we're still, last time we were talking, I think he's still trying to figure out, like, are you guys going to be on, like, a really strict bubble, like, no, like, can't hang out with anyone really outside of, like, the tour package and doing your job. But potentially at the show here in GR, it'll be the first time we'll really get to potentially hang out. But it's funny that it's like two of us who have never known each other, didn't know anything about each other, ended up kind of in the industry in completely different facets, where I'm more media press and he's more touring, stagehand, lighting direction, and all that kind of stuff. So kind of interesting, and then kind of ties into nicely to plug your tour, which is coming up here pretty soon.
Yeah, that's cool.
Where can everyone find you, the band, or whatever else you would like to plug online?
Oh, just you know, you can just look up Dead. It's DED. We are Dead on Twitter, Dead Official on Instagram. I think it's Dead Official on YouTube as well. And you know, Dead Band, I guess everything's on there. It's like the landing page for everything, so you can go on and check it out. And,
well, thank you for taking the time. I had fun chatting, and hopefully you had more fun doing something than probably what you're going to be doing the rest of the day, which is more like, so this record or whatever.
Right. No, yeah, it was. This was a great hang and a good conversation, and yeah, I really enjoy stuff like this a lot more than the you know, the 1 through 10 questions, and it keeps it more interesting. I don't just say the same exact thing, and it keeps it better for, you know, people listening as well, of course. So
absolutely. Well, looking forward to seeing you in I think you're going to be here in about at the end of next month, I think. So I'll see you in about a month. Indirectly from the stage. You'll be on stage. I'll be in the crowd somewhere. I'll see you.
Well, we'll see how the bubble stuff is, but I know we got to keep it tight. But yeah, it'd be cool to say hi if we can when I'm there. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm sure Emily will probably have some way to get a hold of you personally or whatever. I guess I could just send you a DM.
100%.
Yeah. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully the rest of your junket's not too bad.
Yeah, man. No, everything's good.
Have a good one.
Enjoy when you talk with John 5.
So that was my conversation with Joe Cotella of Dead. Again, they have a new single out, Kill Beautiful Things. It was funny. I did see that there was, I think, I can't remember if it was a sponsored post by Dead or if it was a comment, like a PRP or someone sharing the video when it first posted. But it was really funny because the still image of the video was Joe with kind of his tongue out, and then basically everyone just latched on to, I don't want to watch a video with a dude with his tongue out that much. And I thought it was so weird that, like, we're in this, like, I don't want to say first culture, but we're in this, like, weird space now where people will comment literally on a still photo of something without having literally watched the video, watched the thing. I mean, we already know that that's a thing. People comment on headlines all the time without actually reading basically the meat and potatoes of the actual article. They just go off of a headline. So I'm not entirely surprised, but it was very amusing to see people just being like, I'm not going to watch a video if that dude sticks his tongue out that much. I mean, whatever. I think it's a great video. I think it's a great song. I think it shows kind of the expansiveness of Dead's sound, especially from the first record, from the first two singles, you know, with Mannequin Idol and stuff like that. And you know, I also love talking to Joe about, you know, the new Every Time I Die record. I know he's a big E-Tid fan. I know he's a big Keith fan. You know, talking about lyricists, talking about lyrics, talking, you know, just, again, really just talking. I think that's the fun thing. Now that I don't stress about trying to formulate questions that I think are clever or whatever, you know, speaking of Every Time I Die, I feel like that's actually a great comparison. I remember Keith making a comment many years ago when Low Teens was about to come out, and, you know, he talked about getting out of his own way. Stop writing, you know, Every Time I Die lyrics, and they didn't have to be fucking catchy to where people would go get them tattooed on themselves, or that they would repeat them back to him or whatever, that he could write lyrics that were meaningful and impactful. And, you know, he challenged himself to do that and having to kind of step outside of himself. And I feel like that's kind of what I've done with the podcast over the last 6 to 8 months, is kind of stepping beyond just even what I was doing. And I love the fact that almost everybody we've had on the show since then has really gone along with just straight up going on the journey of, like, I don't have questions prepped for you, dude. Like, I'm just going to talk to you. And wherever this goes is where it goes. So I knew Joe would be up for it. I knew that's why I kind of wanted to challenge the publicist and be like, I want an hour with him and I just want to fucking talk. And it did not disappoint. So I know Dead are right now out on tour with In This Moment and Black Veil Brides. As you heard at the end, my cousin, who I've never met, is literally on the tour doing lighting for Black Veil Brides. I'm hoping, because the tour is literally coming here in, as I'm recording this, I think about a week. I'm hoping that I actually get to meet this person that's been in the music industry for a long time that I've never met. And I think that's actually a really interesting and fun fact about this episode, is that's something I learned very recently during the pandemic, to know that I have family that is in this space, basically just in a different capacity. So, and speaking of shows, if you would like to keep up with Dead, it's simple enough. You can just go to deadband.com. That is the landing page for everything. If you want it spelled out for you, though, you can go to Facebook at Dead Official, Instagram at Dead Official, and Twitter at We Are Dead. If you would like to keep up with Joe, you can find him on Instagram at Joe Cotella and Twitter at Dead_Joe. That is everything you need to know about them. If you want to follow this podcast, simple enough, go to BREWspeakPod.com. There's a landing page for everything this podcast. Another really big thing is to support our Patreon. I'm actually putting a lot of fucking content over there. You could have heard this chat, and you could have seen it weeks ago when I had just done it. Every interview I do, I literally upload it within probably 20 minutes of me getting done with it. So you can hear and or see if there's video first thing, as soon as it is done. It literally exists on the Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/BrewspeakPod. For as little as $1, you get some extra podcasts, the side podcast, what I learned from a podcast, the weekly video breakdowns of the weekly playlist that I put out. For $3 a week, you get access to the audio versions of everything. $5, you get the video, if there is a video. And for $10, you get access to everything. And we also do a monthly hangout on Patreon. We'll do just basically a sharing of beers, drinks, whatever, just hang out digitally. It's been a lot of fun. So support us if you can, and support our sponsors for supporting us as well. That would be starting off with On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point. Use their code BSP15. Take 15% off your total purchase order. Rockabilia.com, where they have over 500,000 items in their online store. You can save 10% off your total purchase order by using our code BREWtally. That's BREWtally at checkout. Take 10% off your total purchase order. Want to thank them for supporting us. And last but not least is the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head on over to thebeanbastard.com, buy you some delicious coffee, and if you're in the Buffalo, New York area, go to their brick and mortar, support those guys and gals for supporting us. And for the BREWtally Speaking Podcast, I am John, and next week's episode is with Marco from Sugar Cult. That was a really good one. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you next week.
Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Coach, what'd you think?
Fucking embarrassing!
Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but I think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about new?
Okay, I thought we were going to get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks. But you knew what you were getting into. It will result in less listens. You're going to see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're going to see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you. Don't use this fucking riff. It sucks.